over in this side, please.
So this skull has what, 8,601 diamonds in it. So how much was it?
Hopefully it's not about money at the end of the day.
Tell us about the skull. How much have you spent?
What's the retail value of this one?
And you confirm it's the most expensive ever work by a living artist?
I don't know.
Did you pay for all the diamonds then?
Is it true that you sold it for £50 million?
So let's talk about £14 million worth of diamonds and platinum. Is there anything in your mind that makes you think that there's something obscene about that?
I think inherent in every artwork or everything you do, there's a reason. There's something that makes sense. It all comes out of the idea of what the idea is. What does it mean? How do you say I love you with objects instead of words or actions? I mean, I think that's what art is. I wanted to be a painter, but it didn't really come naturally to me. It was like a void, and the infinite possibilities of what I could paint used to sort of do my head in. I want a figure here, or I want a car here, or I want some trees here, and I could then, the infinite possibilities of which car, which trees, which person, how big they should be. I just used to get lost, so I spent a lot of time sitting in front of a blank canvas and not doing anything. And I think the desire to be a painter is an unhealthy desire as well. It's in the same way that being famous or, wanting money, or they're not the right kind of desires. It's like, the desire is the ideas, and then paint's a good way to express it. I moved into a house with some friends in London because I didn't know what I was doing then. They'd all got into art school, so I moved into a house with them and I got a job as a labourer. I'd run out of money, I think, and I just went for this one job. And the guy said to me, "What's your name?" And I said, "Damien." He went, "Have you got any middle names? I'm not calling you that." And I went, "Steve." And he went, "Steve, start on Monday." And they called me Steve for like 2 or 3 years. Then I remember I was sat with this guy called Ricky, who was a plasterer. He had one big strong arm and he'd spit. And he was eating a cold, stuffed ox heart for his lunch, and he was biting it like an apple. I sat around and I was just thinking, I'm not like these guys. I'm an artist and I need to sort of get into it. And then I just left. And then I moved into a studio in White Hart Lane, a squat, and I was living there with some mates. Well, I was trying to paint in the bedroom, and I thought that was my plan to go to college. In my bedroom, I could hear a guy who lived next door, and I could hear him through the wall. I found out later he was called Mr. Barnes, but at the time I didn't know what he was called. And then I started realising that he was one of those guys that went round with a shopping trolley and the bags, and he'd collect things, he didn't bring them back, so he was like a hoarder. I stopped hearing him, and then after I didn't hear him for about a week, I got my friends and I said, "Look, come on, let's go and have a look." So we went in and kicked both doors down. When we first went in, it was like the whole room was just filled with stuff, and it had become an object, it had become a thing, and it was like there was only a little walkway through both rooms to just get round there, and the rest of it was just piled to the ceiling. Slowly over, I think it was a period of only about 2 weeks, I started excavating, was the only word to describe it really, all his stuff. I mean, it's probably the single most influential thing that happened to me more than an artist, really, because I think I worked out the dates of it. It was like 60 years of this guy's existence in one room. I went from the top down. I started peeling things out, and I was opening bags and finding things in there, books and magazines, whole collections. And I'd find heads from the graveyard of statues, a bag with every toothpaste tube he'd ever used for 60 years, completely rolled out and rolled up, and he'd never thrown anything out. I started taking things back to my studio, things that I liked, and I started making little collages and using the paint that I'd already got, to kind of make them my own. From being sat in a studio and not knowing what to do, I became really productive. It was like fire, it just caught fire, really. These collages, I was painting on them, so they were like paintings, they were like sculptures, and they sort of bridged the gap, they were everything. They were, I couldn't say I'm a painter or I'm a sculptor. And then I saw Goldsmiths was the only course at the time where they didn't differentiate, they just had an art course. Every other college, you had to choose painting or sculpture. So I've made a decision, I don't just want to go to art school, I want to go to Goldsmiths. remember at Goldsmiths, they were definitely thinking, well, who's that guy? Like Gary Hume was in the year above me, and he was like making these, what I thought were great paintings of hospital doors. And I was painting pans with gloss paint. I'd come from Leeds where abstract expressionism was everything, and it's all about feelings. You don't have to communicate, you don't have to put it into words, you just go, it's how I feel today and I'm just going to express that and have a few beers. But then, when we got to Goldsmiths, the whole teaching thing, you had to justify everything you were doing.
You're much more aggressive with the way you're using paint.
I think, you know, what was fashionable in art was definitely conceptualism and minimalism at that time. Minimalism is like science, you know. You've got order and you've got disorder, so disorder was the kind of abstract expressionism stuff, and minimalism was like the order. And it was just this sort of perfect thing, you know. And then the basic thing about conceptual art is that the art doesn't exist in the object itself, it exists in the mind of the viewer. The art becomes just a trigger to set something off, which is the art, which is the conceptual art. And there was a lot of conceptual artists teaching there, you know, like Michael Craig Martin. And he made this great piece, which is called an oak tree, which is a glass of water on a shelf, and it's got a text with it that says it's not a glass of water, it is actually an oak tree, and it's not a representation, it's nothing else. I mean, I kind of fell in love with conceptualism, with conceptual art. I got seduced by all that, and I realised that my work was in the past, you know what I mean? I was making like collages like Kurt Schwitters, thinking I was changing the world, and I wasn't. And then I realised, oh my God, I've been walking with my head on the ground looking for little bits of wood, trying to make comment about the world. When you look at the world and it's like advertising TV and it's all up there, you know, so I was missing all that by looking at the floor. And I remember that being quite a turning point for me, you know, in a sort of mad year. It was probably my first year at Goldsmiths. The sort of first breakthrough ever was the spot paintings, really, where I totally did away with the past and arrived somewhere, and it sort of meant I could begin. My early paintings, I remember a tutor at college saying to me they'd make great curtain designs. And then I realised that what my problem was in a painting was that I love colour. I'd just get totally seduced and I could play with colour all day long. And things would be weak formally in terms of like symbolism or anything like that. But I'd overpower all that with colour, which is why you could look at it and say it's like a curtain design or something else like that. I always think there's an infinite number of ways to get to the same point, and for me it's about language, so it's about how can you communicate this idea to somebody, and the idea is intangible always. So the spot paintings, I just created that structure with equal gaps to spots endlessly in a few different sizes, and then I could just play with those colours in any arrangement that I wanted. So it just freed me up from all that other stuff. I didn't need any symbolism, I didn't need any metaphor, I didn't need anything beyond that. I could just do that endlessly. And it was just, and that was, in my mind, it was like an imaginary painter, like a conceptual painter who existed, but almost like a machine. At the time, I was getting into the idea of the endless series as a sort of strand of conceptual art. I just loved the idea of these artists who set out to just do endless variations of one thing, like Ryman with his white paintings, or Dan Flavian with his fluorescent tubes. Sol LeWitt was the other one. He came up with different systems for making his art and then made instruction books so that anyone could carry on making them forever, indefinitely. And so, with the dot paintings, I just thought it was about repetition, and it's about endlessness, and it's about immortality. And so I just thought, well, this should be an endless series. I think maybe I even toyed with the idea of saying, you know, stop everything else and only do this. If I did that and I did nothing else, it'd be an excellent career. But it was just one aspect of what I was doing. I was working at Anthony Doffer Gallery, got like a job 3 days a week, you know, working in the back room with great art. And it just dawned on me that what was happening at Goldsmiths, a lot of artists' work there was on a level that it would stand up next to this great art in the gallery. And then I started thinking, well, there's no way that, you know, that this amount of people are going to be incorporated into the art world the way it was. There's only a few galleries. I should just do a show.
Damien just asked a load of people if they wanted to be in a show. But it wasn't just being in a show, it was also whether you want to muck in and sort out this building and get the whole thing together, so it was quite a joint. Everyone had to pitch in with that.
Damien Hirst exhibited in the show but also organised the building, the lighting, the catalogue and the PR.
Nick Sirota from The Take came, Norman Rosenthal,
Yeah.
and a lot of people from like London galleries, practically everybody really.
So what does everyone at the school think?
Well, there's a bit of mixed feelings, I think. It's kind of separated the school into two halves. A lot of people who are kind of anti-freeze, and a lot of people who are for it.
Who are the ones who are anti-freeze? Why are they there?
I don't know, I think it's just, you know, any kind of success, people don't really like it, do they? It's a big responsibility that I didn't really like. I mean, in the beginning it was like, you know, I was just a curator. It's like, so it sort of hindered me. You know, everybody else took off and then people didn't take me seriously as an artist because I was the guy who organised the exhibition. You know, I hadn't done the medicine cabinets when I did Freeze. I'd just sort of arrived at I was doing those cardboard boxes, so I actually did feel that maybe they were right in some ways. It sort of spurred me on into my art. I built my first medicine cabinet in the kitchen based on a cabinet I'd liked in a pharmacy or something. I'd looked in the chemist and thought, I want that, and I want to be able to put that in a gallery. But I didn't have the guts to just put it in the gallery. But then I saw Jeff Koons Hoover pieces, and then I went, oh my God, you can just take it and put it in the gallery. I didn't realise, I thought I had to do something to it in order to make it my own. And then I realised you didn't. There's an emptiness to conceptual art and minimal art that was in the past, and so I was seduced by it, but then wanted to bring it back to life in some way and put something more into it. The thing that kept going through my head was always, it has to be about something, it has to be about something, and something you can explain to the builders I used to work with and the guys I grew up in Leeds with. You know, we're all capable of huge amounts of wonder, you know, it's like, and that's what art's about, is wonder, you know. I wanted to create something which was a life cycle, and then I remember thinking that flies are like little black dots. I remember watching a fly flying around and thinking that that's great futurist sculpture. You could create this moving spatial thing. But then I worked out, and what I'll do is I'll have a whole life cycle with flies, where they live, they die, they get killed. And then once I had that idea, then I had no idea how to construct it or anything. I just knew that's what I wanted. Because I had such a lack of money, I spent a lot of time working on it. I remember when I first worked it out and did the sums for what it was going to cost to make it, I missed off the bolts, the nuts and bolts, and then the nuts and bolts were like a fortune. And I was like, oh God, why didn't I think of the nuts and bolts? Thousand Years is absolutely phenomenal. I totally love it. It's like a one-off really for that piece. I'd love to be the kind of artist that just made 70 or 80 pieces like that all my life and that was it. You know, I didn't do any of the other stuff. But I think that's not the point. You've got this journey and it's not about pulling it off every time. And you know, that's what's exciting really.
This painting is by the 26-year-old British artist Damien Hirst. Entitled Arby, it is one of a series of such works that Hirst has produced over the last couple of years. Good-looking, decorative, mild in effect, it contrasts sharply with some of his other creations, which notoriously revolve around the rotting corpses of dead animals.
We're living in really exciting times. I remember thinking you can do what you want, you know, you can invent the future. I was living in Brixton, in the barrier block, and I got a studio in Brixton after I moved in, which was on Minute Road, and it was in a breaker's yard. The guy there had an evil guard dog called Fucker. So we'd have to walk through there, walk past all the cars to work down there. There was a little community, there was like 7 or 8 artists. I was priming a canvas. and flies were landing in the paint. And I remember thinking, again, like an imaginary painter who was like trying to paint monochromes and insects kept screwing them up, and then they became the work. And I thought, oh well, that'd be brilliant if they were butterflies. So the byproduct of something horrible happening, like an insect landing in the painting, became a great thing. And they're supposed to look like monochrome paintings that got screwed up by butterflies landing in them when they were wet. After I thought about that, I thought, well, actually, if you could have a canvas where the butterflies grew on the paintings and flew off them, it'd be like total three-dimensional painting, like this kind of beauty, leaving the surface of the painting and inhabiting the room and inhabiting the space, which is kind of what you wanted art to do. Paintings that came to life. I've always looked for universal triggers, you know. I mean, I love the butterfly because it's such a kind of overused symbol. I mean, cliches really. I was looking for realism as well as conceptualism, because the only thing about conceptualise is it's not real. I remembered I'd gone to the Anatomy Museum and the Anatomy Department in Leeds College, and I'd drawn from the bodies in there, which was just to back up my life drawing in Leeds. But I'd gone in the rooms, I'd taken my mates there with for the shock of like dead bodies and everything. I'd looked in the museum where they have all these things in formaldehyde. And then I thought, well, you know, with that formaldehyde, that's the way you can make it real. If I took those, again, like I did in The Chemist, I just take those things in the jars out of the museum that I'd seen in Leeds and I put them in a cabinet, and you go, that is real then. The first thing I made was a fish piece. That was kind of great because they were in their own environment, so it's sort of believable.
When I saw the fish on the wall, I had no idea what he was doing. And all I could see was all these fish swimming in the same direction as we do in life. And I felt very sad about it. Not about his piece, but about what it said to me. I'm not sure he meant it to say that, but that's what it said to me, that we're all conforming. And that's not necessarily a good thing.
I was taught by my mum to confront things you can't avoid, and death's definitely one of the big things. And when you're a kid, you're not afraid of death, are you? I mean, I'm definitely afraid of it now. I mean, as you get older, you get more and more and more afraid of it, you know. But I think when I was a kid, I definitely didn't have any fear. It just excited me. I was always thinking about it. I remember when I was really young saying to my grandmother, who was quite close to me, we used to talk about death a lot. And I must have been younger than 7 when it dawned on me that there was nothing you could do about it, you're going to die. And I was like, what? You mean if you don't get shot and you don't get hit by a car and you don't get cancer and if you avoid all those things, you die anyway? And she went, yeah, you die of old age. And I was like, bummer. The shark, that was quite an early idea. It was a mad idea, but I just thought, it's got to be big enough to eat you, and it definitely came out of Jaws, watching Jaws, you know, when I was a kid. I think I'd worked out it was going to cost £25,000 or something to fabricate it, and I remember saying to, like, you know, friends at college that I want to get a shark in a gallery big enough to eat you and put it in a tank, and they just laughed, you know, it seemed like a stupid idea. But once you get over that and you go, okay, look, I know it's a stupid idea, but let's just look at the logistics of it. It's like, where'd you get the shark? How much is the tank? How do you build the tank? Where do you get the glass? How much is the glass? So I'd worked all that out in drawings, on fag packets, on beer mats, and then Saatchi commissioned it. I found the shark by looking at the atlas around the Australian Bight and where the sharks live. And I phoned up all the post offices around there and asked them to put a poster up with my phone number on it saying shark wanted. And the phone rang for 2 weeks in the middle of the night. And that's how we found the guy who caught the shark. And then I thought, well, zoos are shit places anyway, and they're kind of tragic, all the animals are miserable. And then I thought, well, wouldn't it be brilliant if you could make a zoo of dead animals? And again, that was going to be an endless series of animals called, you know, natural history.
proud of these. That's freezing.
The cutting, I think that was still to do with minimalism. You know, it worked for me with the spots to take that kind of organic craziness of painting, you know, that I couldn't control and putting it into a controlled, minimal structure like that. So then to cut something in half, it's an organic chaos, but once you cut it in half, it has this, it's this scientific way of looking at it. It's like a way to explain something. It's trying to rot and we're not going to let it. When I tried a sheep into a tank, I didn't think it would work, but it actually did something else, and it had a tragedy and a tranquility to it. It just changed it from almost from being dead to back to being alive. It made you have sympathy for it in some way, or some sort of understanding, which I didn't expect.
And now I'm very pleased to announce the winner of the 1995 Turner Prize. And the winner is Damien Hirst.
What can I say? It's amazing what you can do with an E and A level art. Twisted imagination and a chainsaw. I want to thank my girlfriend, who we had a baby together this year, which is the most wonderful thing I've ever been involved in creating. Thanks. Funny, because that whole time around the Turner Prize, I remember thinking it was going to last forever. There was a massive hub of activity. There was Blur, Oasis, all that stuff, Pulp, you know, all these great bands, and we're all hanging out, we're all drinking in the Groucho Club. It was like one massive drinking party. By then I'd expanded the studio in Brixton, and I've got Hugh Allen and Rachel Howard and my girlfriend Maya helping me make the art and do all the spot paintings. The thing is, the conceptual side of it is an endless series of endless spots, but the reality of it is all these kind of dramatic different objects. It's the same with all the series, really. Natural history, the cabinets. The hand of the artist was definitely not important. I felt much more like an architect who was designing these things. I don't think there's a big difference in how you make the art. I've made some very dark pieces when I've been surrounded by people, and through making, you know, very personal pieces using assistants.
Yeah, all right. Oh, that's great, that's great. Oh, that's fab, that's really fabulous. Get through to all those millions who are admiring you for what you are.
Do you think people take me seriously as an artist like that?
Oh, I think so.
Are dealers bringing their percentages down when they try and get
They're
you for
not
shows?
now. I mean, I do it the other way. I just make sure that I get, that if it's 50-50, which is what it is in art, then that my dealer does a hell of a lot of work for me.
The other temptation is the big fish will say, if you pay this percentage, I'm the kind of dealer that can get you in museums. So that's really what you're paying me for.
Yeah, but museums are for dead artists, though, aren't they, anyway?
Come on.
I hate them, I avoid it.
There's so many young artists that they'd still love a piece in the Tate, they'd still love a piece in the
It's great to have a piece in the Tate, but a show in the Tate is not necessarily that great.
surprised by the fuss that surrounded the Sensation exhibition?
Not really. I mean, I think art's popular. You know, I mean, there's a lot of good art going on in England. I mean, that's what I got from the Sensation show. You go around there and you read all this stuff, but when you actually go around it, you look at it and you think, God, you know, these people are having a great time. I suppose it happened with punk in '77. You know, the Sex Pistols got to #1. I remember that was the first thing that made me realise you can change the world. I went to art school and into London with that kind of mentality. I just wanted things that you couldn't avoid. Whether you liked them or not, it didn't really matter. It was just like you couldn't get them out of your head. And then Sensation was the culmination of all that, because it was like, you know, Saatchi just took all those things and put them all in one space in the Royal Academy, which was like, oh my God, you know, it's the Queen's. Because I was too young to be a punk, it was like my punk moment, really.
He's better with his glasses on.
You know, when I started off, I said I don't give a fuck about money because I didn't have any. Everybody who doesn't have money says that, but then you get to a point where if you start to make money, then you do give a fuck about it.
There's not an extra piece for this, is there? You didn't see anything anywhere?
But as an artist, you make art from what's around you. You know, it's like when you've got money around you, you can have bigger and better, stronger ideas. I put into production some more expensive things, really, on my terms, with my money. You just had a lot more control. Like making him to a large size like that. It was about making viewers feel like a child again. So I put that into production, and I didn't have to go to anybody else for money. Like the Saatchi thing was always difficult. I remember being in the gallery, and I put the shark one way when Saatchi did it, and I came in and he moved it back the other way. And he was paying for it, so it went the way he wanted, and that really annoyed me. So I thought, I mean, I sort of said to myself, you know, I really want to avoid commissions wherever possible after that. So to make him, I went into the foundry with a child's toy, one of Connor's toys, and said, I want to make this massive. I think I'd worked out it was going to cost maybe 100 grand, which was a hell of a lot of money at the time. You know, I mean, you could buy a street where I grew up for that kind of money, so it was pretty intimidating. And then with that child's toy, it becomes like monolithic in an old sort of tradition of bronze works, but then I put a skin on it which made it look like plastic. It just seemed to, you know, sort of throw you in a way. My business manager, Frank, said to me, we should put £1 million on this. I was like, you know, I got worried at that point. I remember thinking it wasn't worth it, because it was just too much money, you know. I mean, when I was a kid, I was growing up, I remember, you know, having so little money that we were trying to find money on the street, looking around, you know, thinking, I hope I found a £1 note, you know, with your head on the ground. And then we got £1 million for it. I remember thinking, this is mental, you know, this sort of area that we're in. Mexico, we went for quite a few holidays. You know, it's a big surf spot. So we went for Maya again for surfing. We'd looked for somewhere to buy abroad, and we went to Mexico, and then I fell in love with it again. I've always made artwork that's about death, which has always sort of felt to me like it was about life, but people, you know, I remember people sort of thinking I was a bit morbid and had a sort of fascination with it. And then in Mexico, I just found that brilliant way that they deal with death. It's so brutal, they've got such a brutal historic past, you know, with such bloodshed with the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Christianity, that they managed to make their mascot or cultural identity death, you know, which is like a celebration of death. In England, you know, we sort of sweep it under the carpet, and it's very difficult to deal with it, and people don't like to talk about it, and it's, you know, you don't talk about death, especially at dinner. Whereas in Mexico, they're having picnics in the graveyard, you know, and they seem to walk hand in hand with it, and it seemed healthy, you know. I wanted to show in Mexico, so I thought it made sense that I was spending so much time there. So we did a big show called The Death of God. I did the show with Hilario Galguero. I met him out there, and he had me meeting with like the heads of the Catholic Church to warn them that we were going to do this and was it going to be a problem, and they were calling up their more radical factions and saying, leave this guy alone, we're behind him.
Maybe we are not an educated country because we are a poor country, but we're a very cultured country, which is different. All these thoughts about death, about life beyond death, about love, about passion, about tragedy are happening here in Mexico in a very contemporary way.
People liked it in Mexico, you know. I mean, I felt right at home there. You can celebrate incredibly bad things. That's the difference between art and life. Art is always optimistic, even if it's about very dark things. And what's not optimistic is not making art. You know, it's that when there's nothing there, that's sad. But as soon as you create art or sing or dance or perform or, you know, do anything, it's always optimistic. And I think that's where the idea for the diamond skull came out of. I was thinking about what's the maximum you could throw against death. And I'd always loved that turquoise skull that's decorated, that's in the British Museum. And I remember thinking decoration's not seen as a kind of very good thing. So then to have death as something very powerful and to decorate it with, you know, diamonds, it seems like it becomes a very powerful thing. I was sort of probably feeling the money piling up, and then I thought, I've got to do something with this money because it's artistic, art-wise, you know, it's like an art material. You know, I've got to treat it like an art material, otherwise it's going to fuck the art up in some way. It just made sense of all the money at that moment for me. I suppose I've always really been afraid that money is more important than art, or that I'm using the art to get the money instead of using the money to make the art. It frightened me to be spending that amount of money on it at the time. But, you know, from an art point of view, I felt it was worth it. But, you know, it definitely pushed me to the limit.
So let's talk about £14 million worth of diamonds and platinum. Is there anything in your mind that makes you think that there's something obscene about that?
Hopefully it's not about money at the end of the day.
What's the retail value of this one?
It's not about money. I mean, I feel happy that the diamond skull exists in the world. Totally, whenever I see it, it just fills me, even though somebody's made it, with awe and wonder. There's some crazy shit in the world, and that's one of those things. I mean, I always say that my belief in art is like a belief in religion, whereas I don't believe in God and I don't believe in religions, but I believe in art that you can achieve infinitely more than is there, which is like what, you know, it's the kind of like a religious faith, really. I was brought up a Catholic till I was 12, and then my mum and dad got divorced. I never really quite believed it, and I just used to moan and not want to go to church. But, you know, there's very powerful imagery and powerful stories, and a lot of bloodthirsty imagery, and I've always been into all that. I took a lot of the imagery, and I made the piece called The Inescapable Truth, which is a dove in formaldehyde. I mean, a bird in liquid is horrible anyway, but it's hopeful as well. It just says hope, you know. And it seems to me more that the hope is in art and not really in religion or anything religious at all. It just seems that, you know, art can give us hope in some way.